I turned 47 last month, and my mother still worries about me like I'm a boy coming home from school. She calls every Sunday evening, right around 6:30, just as the light starts to fade through my kitchen window. "Daniel," she said last week, her voice carrying that particular tone I've learned to recognize over the years. "I want you to meet someone." I was standing at the counter, making myself a grilled cheese sandwich. Simple dinner for a simple Tuesday. I'd gotten pretty good at cooking for one over the past few years. "Mom, we've talked about this," I said, flipping the sandwich carefully. "Just listen," she insisted. "Her name is Margaret. She lives 3 streets over from me. You remember the Lawson house, the blue one with the white shutters? She moved in about 2 years ago. I did remember that house. I'd driven past it countless times when visiting Mom. It had good bones, as my father used to say. He'd been gone 5 years now, and I still caught myself thinking in his phrases. "She lost her husband last year," Mom continued, her voice softer now. "Cancer. They were married for 23 years. She's been having a hard time, Daniel, and I thought, maybe you two could just talk. Have coffee, no pressure." I turned off the stove and stood there, looking at my sandwich. The cheese had melted perfectly. I'd become an expert at these small domestic victories. "What makes you think she'd want to meet me?" I asked. Mom was quiet for a moment. I could picture her in her kitchen, the same kitchen where she'd raised me and my sister, probably sitting in Dad's old chair by the telephone table. "Because," she said finally, "I told her about you, about how you make people laugh at the hardware store, about your vegetable garden, about how you still volunteer at the animal shelter every Saturday." And she smiled, Daniel. It was the first real smile I've seen from her in months. That's how I found myself, the following Saturday afternoon, walking up the stone path to that blue house with the white shutters. I was carrying a small potted basil plant from my garden. Mom had suggested flowers, but that seemed too much, too intentional. A plant you could use felt friendlier somehow. Margaret answered the door, and I recognized her immediately, though we'd never officially met. I'd seen her at the grocery store, always moving through the aisles with a quiet determination, her cart never very full. She was probably around my age, maybe a year or two younger. She had kind eyes, the kind that crinkled at the corners even when she wasn't smiling, like they'd spent years practicing kindness and couldn't quite stop. "You must be Daniel," she said. Her voice was gentle, a little tentative. "Your mother has told me so much about you. I hope not everything," I said, and was relieved when she laughed. It was a good laugh, genuine. "Come in, please. I've made iced tea. Unless you prefer coffee? I can make coffee." "Iced tea sounds perfect," I said, stepping inside. Her home was comfortable. Not fancy, just lived in. There were photographs on the mantel, and I tried not to stare at them, but I caught glimpses. A man with a warm smile, his arm around Margaret at what looked like a beach somewhere. The same man. Older, thinner, but still smiling. We sat in her sunroom, a beautiful space that looked out onto a garden that was trying its best to grow. The tea was sweet, just how I liked it, with fresh mint from her garden. "Your mother is quite the matchmaker," Margaret said after a comfortable silence. There was no judgment in her voice, just a kind of amused acceptance. "She means well," I said. "She worries. Mothers do that." Margaret looked out at her garden. "I have 2 sons, both on the West Coast now. They call every week, sometimes more. They worry, too. Do you miss them? Every day. But they have their own lives. Good lives. That's what you want for your children, isn't it? For them to be happy, even if it means they're far away." I nodded, understanding. I never had kids. Came close once, but life had other plans. "Life often does," she said quietly. We talked for over an hour that first day. About small things mostly. She told me about her work at the library, how she loved the quiet mornings before the building opened, when she could shelve books in perfect silence. I told her about the hardware store I'd managed for the past 15 years, about the regular customers who'd become friends, about Mr. Peterson who came in every Thursday just to tell the same jokes. She laughed at that. A real laugh this time, not just polite. "Your basil plant," she said, gesturing to where I'd set it on her counter. "That was very thoughtful." "I grow too much anyway," I said. "Seemed like it should go to someone who'd use it." "I love to cook," she said, and for the first time, something like real enthusiasm entered her voice. I haven't been cooking much lately. Just for myself, it seems. I don't know. Less important somehow. I understand that, I said. I've been living on grilled cheese and soup for longer than I'd like to admit. Before I left, she asked if I'd like to come back the following week. Maybe we could cook something together, she suggested. If you'd like, no pressure. I said yes without hesitation. That next Saturday, I arrived with fresh tomatoes from my garden and a box of pasta I'd picked up from the Italian market downtown. Margaret had prepared everything else. Garlic, olive oil, fresh mozzarella, basil from the plant I'd brought her the week before. We worked together in her kitchen, moving around each other with surprising ease. She showed me how her husband had taught her to make sauce the way his grandmother had made it in Sicily. Simple, just good ingredients, treated with respect. He was a wonderful cook, she said, stirring the pot slowly. He said that cooking was an act of love, that you couldn't make good food if you were angry or sad. You had to bring joy to it. Was he right? I asked. She thought about it, really thought about it. Mostly yes, though I think he might have been talking about more than just cooking. We ate dinner at her dining room table, and it was the best meal I'd had in years. Not because the food was fancy, it wasn't, but because it was made with care, shared with someone who understood what it meant to sit across from another person and just be present. Afterwards, washing dishes together, she said, I want to tell you something, Daniel. I want to be honest with you. I waited, tea towel in hand. I'm not looking for someone to replace Tom. That's my husband, Tom. I'm not trying to move on from him or forget him. I don't think I could, even if I wanted to. I wouldn't want you to, I said quietly. She looked at me then, really looked at me. Your mother told me about Sarah, your fiancée, the one who passed away. Sarah. I hadn't heard someone say her name out loud in months. We'd been planning our wedding when the car accident happened. 22 years ago now, but some griefs don't fade. They just become part of who you are. I'm not trying to forget her either, I said. Margaret nodded slowly. Then maybe, she said, we can just be two people who understand, who can sit together and make pasta and not pretend that our hearts aren't a little bit broken. I'd like that very much, I said. And so we did. We started meeting every Saturday. Sometimes we'd cook together. Other times we'd work in her garden, which slowly began to flourish under our joint attention. I brought plants from my greenhouse. She brought knowledge from years of reading gardening books at the library. We talked about everything and nothing. She told me about her marriage, about the good years and the hard ones, about sitting with Tom through his treatments, about the moment she knew he wasn't going to make it. I told her about Sarah, about the plans we'd made, about how I'd kept myself so busy for so many years that I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to sit still. My mother called one Sunday, cautious. How are things going with Margaret? Good, Mom, really good. Are you two dating? I thought about it. Were we? We held hands sometimes when we walked through the park. Last week, when she'd had a particularly hard day, missing Tom on what would have been their anniversary, I'd held her while she cried. And she'd done the same for me when I'd found an old photo of Sarah in my wallet. I don't know what we are, I told Mom honestly. But whatever it is, it's good, it's kind. And that feels like enough. Your father would have liked her, Mom said softly. Yeah, I agreed. He would have. It was October when things shifted between us. We were sitting on her porch, drinking cider, watching the leaves turn gold and red. Margaret reached over and took my hand. I think I'm falling in love with you, she said, and it terrifies me, because I didn't think I could love anyone else. I didn't think I wanted to. My heart was pounding. I know what you mean. Tom was my everything for so long, and when he died, I thought that part of my life was over, the loving part, the being loved part. But... She turned to look at me, those kind eyes shining. But you've shown me that the heart is more spacious than I thought, that I can love Tom and miss him and still have room for something new, something different but just as real. I brought her hand to my lips, kissed it gently. Sarah used to say that love wasn't a limited resource, that it multiplied, it didn't divide. I never quite understood what she meant until now. Do you think they'd be happy for us? Margaret asked. Tom and Sarah? I thought about Sarah's laugh, her endless optimism, her belief in second chances. I thought about Tom, the man I'd come to know through Margaret's stories, who'd taught her that cooking was an act of love. I think they'd be furious if we wasted this chance at happiness, I said. Margaret laughed through her tears, and then she leaned in and kissed me. It was soft and sweet and tasted like apple cider in autumn and new beginnings. My mother was beside herself with joy when we told her we were together. I knew it, she kept saying. I just knew you two were meant to find each other. Mom, I said gently, we're taking it slow. We're not rushing into anything. Of course, she said, though I could hear the wedding bells already ringing in her mind. But we did take it slow. We both knew what it was like to love deeply and lose everything. Neither of us wanted to be careless with something so precious. We spent the holidays together. Margaret's sons came to visit, and they were wonderful, cautious at first, protective of their mother, but warming up when they saw how happy she was. We exchanged gifts on Christmas morning at her house. She gave me a cookbook that had belonged to Tom, full of recipes in his handwriting. I gave her a key to my house, just in case you ever need a quiet place, I said. Or if you want to use my greenhouse, she cried, which I'd learned was just what Margaret did when she was overwhelmed with emotion. Happy tears, sad tears, grateful tears. She felt everything deeply, and I loved that about her. On New Year's Eve, we stood on her back porch, watching fireworks in the distance from someone else's celebration. It was cold, and we were bundled in coats and scarves. What are you hoping for this year? Margaret asked. More of this, I said simply. More quiet mornings, more cooking together, more of your laugh, more of you. That sounds perfect, she whispered. And it was. Not perfect in the fairy tale sense. We both still had hard days. She still cried for Tom sometimes, especially on difficult anniversaries. I still kept Sarah's photo on my bedside table, but we'd built something together that honored our pasts while embracing our future. Looking back now, I understand what my mother saw that I couldn't see. Not two broken people trying to fix each other, but two whole people, scarred by loss but not defined by it, ready to share the remainder of their days with someone who understood the precious, fragile nature of love. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is open ourselves to the possibility that our stories aren't over, that there might be another chapter waiting, one we never expected to write, and sometimes that chapter turns out to be the most beautiful one of all, not because it erases what came before, but because it builds upon it, with wisdom and grace and the deep knowledge that love, in all its forms, is never wasted. It lives on, in memories and in new beginnings, in quiet Saturday afternoons and shared meals, and the simple, profound act of choosing each other, day after day, with kindness and gratitude and hope.